Hey everybody, this is Perch. This is an interesting mail, and I think it brings up a good point that I, I, s- I have a feeling that like one generation will totally get it, resonate with it, another won't. But let's see. It says, "Dear Perch, the Neil Gaiman thing got me thinking about Karen Berger and Vertigo, and how effectively that line tapped into '90s alternative culture, specifically the witchy goth side of things. Dave McKean's Vertigo Tarot deck is incredible. It is, by the way. I think." Dave McKean in general is an artist who is just ridiculously talented, does not get enough credit. He gets credit within the circles that he's in, but more mainstream. Like you don't hear Dave McKean's name come up as a major mainstream artist, but absolutely is. Chris Bachalo kind of did the flip over and became more mainstream. He did a lot of work on Shade the Changing Man with Mark Buckingham back in the day, and it was like that art and a lot of the styles that came out of there was just incredible. Rich Pace, uh, hey, anyway, a lot of good people there. Um, it says even at that commercial level, comics used to be counterculture. That goes back to the '60s and '70s alternatives, I guess. But Alan Moore's stuff has become really important to leftist radicals. Love and Rocket seems to be better appreciated in the music scene than it is in the comic shops. I'd argue Flaming Carrot is a genuine beat comic book. Or maybe that's just me. What about what Milton Cookies and Zot, and I mean, you have a lot of comics in that era. You have a ton of stuff from the UK invasion, the British Underground era of comics, whatever. It says back to the mail. It says for whatever reason, comics and alternative culture have seriously diverged since the turn of the century. Even independent books now feel really mainstream, or at least mainstream adjacent. Walking Dead is a huge title, but it's not exactly pushing any envelopes creatively. Saga and shit like that is a TED Talk core. The superhero books that get dinged online for being woke sometimes stomp around and act punk rock, but they're less threatening than network television sitcoms were in the mid 90s in 1995. My question is, why did this happen, and how do comics get back to having alternative credibility? Is it even possible? I love this question because I've tried to have this conversation with people before, and it seems to I don't know, it's like there's like I said, there's an older group, the people who were actually around buying comics, Vertigo comics in the early '90s, remember a lot of the UK books. They remember this genre, this style of quote unquote punk rock. Punk rock comics. They remember the style of punk rock comics. I don't know if punk rock is the right term. It's kind of this catch-all term. Like you're saying, it's alternative. That there was a lot of brilliant books that fit that mold. Well, today they again, like you said, they claim that those books are still going on, but they're not. I mean, and that's kind of the biggest kind of aggravation I have with a lot of the commentary of like, look at all these woke books, except they're not woke books. They're about as threatening and challenging as like warm toast. There's nothing punk rock about them. Having it's like, hey, like an example is his Marvel, and Marvel is like a bad place to start because really it's about the indies. But Marvel did the daughter of Blade. What was her name again? Anyway, Blade's daughter, and Danny Lore was doing the book, and Danny's like, yeah, this is a true punk rock book for Marvel. Bullshit. What makes it punk rock? Oh, she's got a piercing and she's black and she's lesbian or non-binary or whatever they're having the character be. The character is basically telling you like, I'm non-binary, I'm strong and capable, I've got a nose ring. It's like that is not that like Sid Vicious be rolling over his grave. That is not anywhere close to dangerous. Like if you want to blow your mind, like go read Shade the Changing Man or some of the books from that era of Vertigo. It's not the same. Like it is not the same at all. I've heard people recently go, Shade the Changing Man was a trans allegory. No, it wasn't that either. Nope, got it wrong. And this isn't a comic book only thing. This is a society thing. I think there's this desperate desire I mean, I'll just say it this way: the kind of Gen Y millennial kind of group desperately wants to have the same kind of creative energy and relevance and power of thought and creativity that the Gen X creators had, and hell, they get a bad rap, but even the boomers who were growing up and doing the British invasion scene in the '70s were doing truly radical things. Miracle Man is a more radical book than anything you're seeing on the largely on the independent scene today. These are not dangerous books. It's like and I don't want to go down the list of the same old creators we always talk about, but it's Mag saying like, "Look, I'm going to create dangerous punk rock comics." Have you read any of those comics? There's nothing dangerous about them. They fail at the goal of actually being alternative. Having a gay character in a comic book in 2025 is not dangerous or alternative. And by the way, you don't have the goal is not to just make dangerous alternative books. In the '90s, you had you had what I'd say is popular books. You had things like the X-Men. You had mainstream books. You had indie books that were telling a story. You had stuff like Love and Rockets. You had stuff like Bone. You had stuff like Sim. You had or Cerebus. You had all kinds of different books that were doing very, very different things. And yeah, you had some alternative books that were tapping into that kind of alt rock, punk rock, goth culture, and doing it well, doing it creatively, having good ideas. But I think the current comic creators, a lot of them, they don't, I mean, bluntly, they're not smart enough. They're not creative enough. They're not good enough at this, but they want to stand out. Their understanding and knowledge of this genre of books is Neil Gaiman dressed all in black and was friends with / dated / what who knows what with Tori Amos, and that he was cool, and he didn't prescribe to any kind of mainstream stuff. You didn't see him doing interviews with a jacket and tie, and like Jim Shooter would show up with his suit. Neil Gaiman's there in his black jeans, and there's even a chain that went from his wallet to his belt. And he had a leather jacket, he wore sunglasses indoors, and that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be different like that. It's like, okay, that was the look of the person and the style, but what you're forgetting about is the creativity and the ideas. And for whatever else Neil Gaiman has gotten up to in his life, his books obviously were written well, they sold well, they were entertaining, they had creative ideas. I would argue, something like Stardust is a good book. I wouldn't necessarily call that alternative goth, counterculture. It was more mainstream, but it was creative. It was new. And Alan Moore, for whatever lumps people want to give him, he wrote good comics. Watchmen is a good comic. And it's not just that he grew a big beard, worshipped a snake god, and got kind of weird in interviews. That's the persona. A lot of the comic creators today who are trying to, claim this space are trying to be the persona without having the actual talent to back up that persona. And as a result, they're just kind of weird mid-30s losers who are kind of pretending to be stuff. This is going to sound kind of mean, but fuck it. Why? Who cares at this point? When Donnie Cates would come out and do interviews, I'm like, you're not going to believe this. This is heavy metal, man. It's like, bro, you have no idea. Like, in many cases, according to kind of the industry, you're a weird little pervert. You're not heavy metal. Like, I pictured this guy like going to go to a mosh pit in the '80s. You get destroyed. I mean, like, I was having this conversation with one of these guys. They're like, yeah, I'm really into alt music, and for whatever reason, we got onto Faith No More and Mike Patton, and and he's like, oh yeah, Faith No More, that's like one of the best alternative bands. It's like, I mean, yes and no. They went pretty mainstream. I mean, they're selling out shows. They were in Wembley, all the rest. I mean, I think if you're truly going for like counterculture things people don't know about, you want to get to Mr. Bungle, or you want to get to some of the other kind of real underground stuff that they did. And it's like, Mr. Bungle, I've never heard of that. I'm like, okay, then I don't know if I'm buying your "I'm punk rock and only listen to alternative" cred that you have, and you can't just, by the way, weight your opinion of somebody based on, like, do they know one album or not, or one, band, but if you're gonna claim the persona of alt rock, alternative, then you have to write the book. So today, I like you, I see very little that reminds me of that era of comics. And the stuff that is truly, quote unquote woke, and this is the take I always think that YouTube and people who are, criticizing comics, they miss is, okay, you're saying this book is woke because there's a trans flag somewhere in it, or who knows, or, there's more black characters and white characters in the book, or somebody is gay. But um, is the book good? Like, is the story good? Is there a story? Because to me, that's the bigger thing you can criticize in a lot of these books. It's not like this book has a bisexual in it, or in this book, there's a panel where the characters are explaining their pronouns. Yeah, that's eye rolling. But look at the rest of the book. The rest of the book sucks. It's boring. The pronouns are the least of the problems. In many cases, with a lot of these, quote woke books, it's not that they're like, oh, there's a gay character in here. It's that there's nothing in there. There's no story. There's no action. There's no conflict. There's no, like, whether it's a superhero book or a slice of life book or whatever else, there's just nothing there. And if you really want to understand why manga is kicking the ass of a lot of Western books, it's because there is a story there. Even if the story is bizarre, even if the story is like a bunch of dudes go to an island and fight with their dicks, which is an actual manga, or, a dungeon adventurers go down and because they're poor and starving, they eat the monsters. And the whole premise of the show goes, they go into the dungeon, they kill things, and then they eat the monsters, and then they cook them in crazy ass ways. That's a manga called Delicious in Dungeon. Or, you could just go, or the Mashal, got moron gets into magic school, punches things. Like, they're simple premises, but there's an actual story in there, and they're killing it in slice of life and in and all these different genres because the story actually is entertaining. And right now, it's like if you take Ranma one half and in this modern remake, and at one point Akane and Ranma go into see Dr. Tofu, and there's a new, shampoo is out, there's a new assistant who's working there, and the assistant goes, my pronouns are she, them. And then, you still might roll your eyes at that line and wonder why it's there. It doesn't have anything to do with the story. But the story of Ranma is a good story. It fits the genre it's in. It's actually entertaining. So regardless of whatever else is going on, it's something you want to watch or want to read. And by contrast, if you take a look at, whatever Danny Lore was saying, the punk rock book of Marvel, Blade's Daughter, it like, the story is just awful. There's no story. Take every single element that people complain about. I remember I said this once on Wes's show. Like, take out the pronouns, take out the hero is non-binary or whatever else, and then just look at the rest of the panels in that book. Is it a good story? The answer is no. It's not even that it's bad. There is no story. There's just nothing there. And that's the problem. So to the original mail writer's question, what happened? The creators of today want the fashion and the personality and the persona of those, alt punk rock creators, but they don't actually have any ideas. Their brains have rotted from years of watching Netflix and being kind of force-fed content that really is pretty benign. To Kirkman, you mentioned Walking Dead. Walking Dead is a mainstream book. The most alternative things about it was that when it was originally published, it was published in black and white. That was the most, different alt thing about it. But it's a mainstream story, and it does it well. That's why it sold well. the books that are trying to claim it, you look at the last several iterations of Vertigo, like, they're the stories are as safe. You could easily see them on Thursday night on network TV. You could eat like, Border Town, now a show on the Lifetime channel or the Peacock network. Like that, like nah, these shows aren't dangerous. Can you imagine, like, from the 90s, Shade the Changing Man on, now appearing on Amazon Prime? Like, yeah, that wouldn't work. I miss those days, and I miss those comics. I loved a lot of those comics. I love these crazy ideas, these bigger than life alternative ideas. I thought they were really cool stories. We don't get those anymore. So, anyway, let me know your thoughts. But yeah, to me, the answer to the question is simple. I think we have a bunch of posers who have no idea what it's like to actually live that lifestyle or be that, and they're doing it for for attempted cred. They're doing it. I don't like the term virtue signaling, but it's like fake. It's just fake personality. They're trying to create a fake personality in order to be interesting because their sad little lives have no meaning. It's this sounds rough maybe, but I've just had way too many conversations where people talk about, here's what I love about Neil Gaiman. And it comes down to, I mean, not anymore, but years ago. And it comes down to, he had a really cool leather jacket and his hair was always so cool. And, and I, more often than not, I would be like, well, what do you think of, Anansi Boys? Or what do you think of, what do you think of this? And it's like, I haven't read those yet. It's like, okay, so you don't like his work. You like his style. You like his haircut. Okay. So go be that. But if you have no creative talent, I guess you're perfectly made for Instagram, but you shouldn't be in comics. Thanks for listening.